From the inside out, this camera is totally different than the last time you saw it. I'm here to take you through all of the changes. Welcome to Sundays with Sean. I am Sean. Today is Sunday, and this camera has had a bit of a glow up. Now you may be wondering why this camera needed changing in the first place. And to explain that, we're going to throw it back to my past self, or myself in the past, or past me. Just go. The reason this camera gives me troubles is because of the dimensions. I've measured this camera to be 105 millimeters wide, which gives us an f-stop of 210. However, my light meter app doesn't have an f-stop of 210. Because of this, I'm forced to shoot a third of a stop above or below what it actually should be shooting at. Changes are definitely coming to this camera, and changes are here. So I want to do two things with this camera. The first is to move the film holder forward to a usable f-stop, and the second, which is a product of the first, is to create a two-chamber system for the film to sit inside of the camera. So we're going to start by removing the old film holder, and I'm going to be doing that by prying it off with a flathead screwdriver. Once the film holder was removed, I touched it up with some black chalk paint. Now it's time to start building the new film holder. I started by measuring the width of the camera onto a piece of basswood and cut it using a jig. The basswood was not large enough to make one solid piece out of for the film holder, so I had to glue two pieces together. Once the glue had dried, I did a little test fit and then marked where I needed to trim off the excess. I purposely left about 3/16 of an inch sticking out of the top of the camera. This is going to push up against the lid slightly and keep everything light tight. Now it's time to measure where the paper will sit on the film holder. I'll be using 3.5 by 3.5 developing paper as my film. Here I'm cutting out small strips of cardstock. This is going to form the channel that the paper slides into. After the cardstock was on, I began gluing down some small strips of wood to create the outer layer of the film holder. This is the part that holds the paper in place. After each piece of wood was glued down, I checked it with a piece of paper just to make sure there was no glue inside of the channel. Now that the film holder is complete, it's time for a quick test fit inside of the camera. Onto the dividing wall that will separate the section behind the film holder into two chambers, and there really wasn't much to it besides gluing two pieces of basswood together and trimming off the excess. Now I learned long ago to paint this wall before gluing it inside of the camera, or else it's going to be a real pain to try to coat everything evenly once it's installed. While the paint was drying, I began calculating where the film holder needed to sit inside of the camera. I placed the film holder about halfway inside the camera and measured the distance from the pinhole to the holder. After doing some calculations to determine the f-stop, I checked with my light meter app to see if that particular f-stop was programmed into it. I'm happy to report that it was, so I started gluing the film holder into the camera. Unfortunately, the hot glue gun was not hot enough and the glue dried as I was sliding in the film holder. I had to break out the heat gun to melt the glue so the holder would slide the rest of the way inside of the camera. With the glue melted, the holder slid into place, and I was able to glue and slide the dividing wall into place as well. At that point, the interior of the camera was complete, but there was a small issue. The 3/16 of an inch that I left on the holder was too tall. The lid wouldn't sit on it like I thought it would, so I ended up cutting down the holder, installing a small light baffle on the lid of the camera. With the interior sorted out, I turned my attention to the exterior. I stained the entire camera and the lid with a Carrington color. This is how the stain turned out, and I absolutely love the rich color. I was hoping that the stain would be dark enough to cover the old sight lines, but that wasn't the case. I did try to sand off the sight lines before staining, but that didn't work too well either. With the old sight lines still on the camera, I started to measure out and draw the new sight lines. And I will say, I love how the white pops against the brown. And with that, the old camera is now a new camera, and the only thing left to do is take it out for a test spin. I love how this camera turned out. Albeit it's not perfect with the visible old sight lines, it's still a great little camera to use. The two-chambered system works exactly like it's supposed to. I'm actually able to get properly exposed photographs with the camera now that the f-stop isn't such a strange number. Or at least it has an f-stop that my light meter app is programmed to shoot for. So that's all I have for you on this Sunday. Thank you all for watching, and remember to please be kind to one another. See you next week. Welcome to Sunset and Forward. To explain that, we're going to throw it back to past me. Chambered system works. It doesn't work.